start with Ms. Terry. You had mentioned that the number of ELL students in Lincoln Public Schools and how you feel that cultural diversity is beneficial to the schools, to the learning environment, the learning experience. I'd like to know how you feel that philosophy about diversity and inclusion applies to other types of difference, such as gender identity.
Yeah, I truly believe that there should be no discrimination based on gender, sexual orientation, race, religion. I don't really understand how asking for transparency and parental permission has turned into that I am discriminating against certain populations. You know, I've heard all means all quite a bit, and you know, I don't think you're going to find anybody who's going to say that some children should not be educated. I know that education is the way for all children to make their way in life. That's the way to get out of poverty, to find opportunities, and so I truly believe that. I do believe there are some children in Lincoln who have not really been included. I was looking at our homeschool statistics recently. We've got over 1,100 homeschoolers in Lancaster County, and there are lots of different reasons why people homeschool, but I think one of the reasons is they don't feel like they have been served well for one reason or another. It could be maybe their child has dyslexia and they're looking for, you know, special tutoring that they can't get. There are lots of different reasons, but I would like to hear some discussion about how we could include those people. Their parents are paying the same property taxes as everybody else is, and you know, I know from experience, for a couple years when we were in Colorado, we homeschooled because we didn't feel like the school in our neighborhood was meeting our kids' academic needs. And we homeschooled until we got to the top of a waiting list for a public school that we wanted them to be in. And we couldn't afford private school. I would say probably most people in Lincoln can't afford private school. So I would like to hear some discussion about what can we do to pull some of those people back in who have felt that they aren't included for one reason or another.
Go ahead, you can go ahead and go first.
Oh, okay. I would agree with Rachel that it is not an issue of discrimination to insist upon more transparency over curricula and more parental control over curricula. With regards to gender identity, how many people in this room are transgender? How many people do you know of a transgender personally? Really?
Absolutely.
That's interesting because I read a University of Berkeley study. It's a few years old. It's 2011 was the study. But they did a sampling of how many Americans identified with the LGBT spectrum, and transgenders amounted for less than 0.1% in their sampling, and this was the adult population. So I'm thinking that number would be a lot less for school children. But on the whole, the purpose is education, communicating skill, and not providing you know, a restroom or a locker room that a majority of people would probably feel uncomfortable if a transgender were allowed to just go into whatever venue that they want to assign themselves to. And so I think that you have to let majority rules on that issue.
I would say that I totally agree. Absolutely, every kid needs to be as specialized and as cared for as possible. I think as we have worked at Campus Life, we work alongside a lot of kids and a lot of adults who come from this particular population that you was just talking about. Going back to your ELL was where you started off. My wife was actually a dual language teacher in Illinois for about 9 years before we moved back here 5 years ago. So I mean, she taught half her day in Spanish and half her day in English because that school system understood Actually, one of the most underserved population in that school system was kids who don't speak native Spanish, or native English, they speak native Spanish. And they were really trying to address those particular kids' needs by teaching them first to read in Spanish, and then teaching them to read in English. I was talking with Dr. Joel a few weeks ago, and I was in his office, and there may be a time coming here in the next few years where we need to consider a program like that because we have so many more immigrants that are coming in to Lincoln.